Days go by, weeks go by, years go by, but what does not go away is my desire to ask you to leave a like at the beginning of the video and to write a comment down below. Anything at all, just to help with the engagement of the channel. So please, start writing your comment down there right now to support us. And that is it. Let us go straight ahead without any more delay into the video. The Kingdom of Kuka is a small place that is currently ruled by a king, but one who does not have any direct successor, neither a prince nor a queen. The monarch only has a daughter of 15 years of age, named Yona. It is a land of reduced size, and the neighboring countries are constantly keeping an eye on it, so wars are a frequent occurrence. Yet, surprisingly, ever since the previous king passed away 10 years ago, everything remained peaceful inside the kingdom. Yona should have attended an important ceremony of her father, yet she ended up not going because she could not find any clothing that pleased her taste. Thus, the event was concluded without the presence of the princess. And although her father always considered Yona beautiful, she lived dissatisfied with her hair, which was thick and unruly. One of the 5 generals that guard the castle, Hak, appeared to tease her, and Hak had that freedom because he was her childhood friend. Hak arrived telling her that Su-won was about to arrive, and as soon as she heard that, Yona ran happily to go meet him. Su-won was also a childhood friend of Yona, and he was 3 years older than she was. It had been a long time since they last saw one another, and Su-won had come to spend the week to celebrate her birthday that was in the following week. As soon as Su-won arrived, he immediately greeted the king, while Yona felt frustrated because he still treated her as if she were a little child. When she was small, Yona suffered greatly because of the death of her mother, and that is why Su-won started to act as a protective figure in her life. For that reason, she holds such strong affection for him, and on the next day Yona went after Su-won and discovered that he was competing in an archery contest against Hak. Curious, she went to watch, and she ended up wanting to learn how to shoot with a bow from Su-won. Only that the king had never allowed Yona to have contact with any weapons. However, Su-won ended up inviting Yona to go for a horseback ride, and she accepted without even thinking twice. Hak helped her mount the horse, and she noticed how gentle Su-won was with girls. Probably that is why he received so many marriage proposals, even though he had never accepted any of them. Not wanting to be left behind, Yona invented that she had already accepted a marriage proposal from Hak. Hak was completely confused, since he had absolutely no idea that he had proposed to her. Meanwhile, Su-won congratulated the couple, leaving Yona unsure if he truly believed that or not. Later, she went to speak with her father, realizing that he did not approve of her being in a relationship with Su-won, despite his talent and of being a descendant of the former king. Su-won had no support from the monarch to become king through marrying her. The king himself admitted that he was a fearful man, but he would never allow Yona to endure the same suffering her mother had faced. Upset, Yona left walking and was approached by a suspicious person. She remembered the warning of her father, became terrified of the situation, and ran away from there, being chased by that person. Su-won ended up finding Yona, and she told him what had happened. But Su-won did not see anyone around there. He realized that she was very frightened and suggested taking her to Hak, thinking that the two of them were engaged. But Yona opened her heart and confessed that the one she truly liked was him. Su-won admitted that he was having difficulties in seeing her as a woman, since he had always looked at her as a child. It was precisely that recognition that Yona wanted to hear, and she might not know anything about politics or about being a ruler, but she was certain of her feelings for Su-won. A few days later, the day of Yona's birthday celebration finally arrived, and at the party Su-won called her aside to give her a gift. Her father, upon seeing that, was dissatisfied with the situation, and the gift in this case was a hair ornament. Yona thought it did not suit her, but Su-won said that he liked her hair just the way it was, and for the first time Yona felt good with her own appearance. Hak appeared and interrupted the conversation, and Yona decided to go to her room to rest. Hak told Su-won that he felt that some suspicious person had entered the castle, and upon hearing about the fright Yona had experienced, he asked Su-won to keep an eye on her while he reinforced the security of the place. That night, Yona decided to go speak with her father about Su-won, but upon arriving there, she noticed that the door was not locked and there was no guard present. When she entered, she was shocked, for she found Su-won and saw him assassinating the king by driving a sword straight into his chest. Meanwhile, Hak was patrolling the castle, and he ended up running into Minsu, who was the personal guard of the king. They talked about what was happening with Yona and with Su-won, about how she had finally fallen in love with someone, and Hak only wished that she could be happy. At that moment we see Yona, who was about to be executed by the guards. but she was saved by Hak, who appeared suddenly and protected her, getting rid of the guards surrounding her. He wanted to understand what was happening there and demanded an explanation from Su-won. Before that, Yona could not believe that Su-won could have done that to her father, but it was something he had already been planning for a long time. The soldiers who were allied with Su-won knew that very few people were aware of the situation, and that they only needed to keep an eye on Hak. When Hak heard the guards talking about that and realized what it was about, he wanted to know how everything had taken place. But as soon as the guards saw him, they went to attack, and he struck back. At that instant, Su-won told Yona that her father was known as a fearful man, one who disliked war, but that made him a gentle and generous person. Years earlier, the former king had preferred to pass the throne to Yona's father instead of choosing the eldest son. Su-won's father, who had never been interested in ruling but loved to fight to protect the people who were important to him, such as his brother, Yona's father. Even so, after taking the throne, Yona's father killed Su-won's father, which made him seek revenge. From the very beginning, Su-won never wanted to hurt Yona because he knew that she almost never went to the king's chambers. At that moment, Kisu appeared, and upon seeing that the mission was completed and that Yona had witnessed everything, he tried to kill her so as not to leave any witnesses. But Yona knocked over a candle and caused a fire, forcing the soldiers of Kai to try to put out the flames. With the confusion unfolding, she managed to escape, but even so she was captured again and later rescued by Hak. At first, Hak did not want to interfere between Yona and Su-won, but he became suspicious of the strange movements among the guards and then decided to confront Su-won to know what was truly happening. Yona ended up feeling deeply relieved to see that she could count on Hak, since he had received direct orders from the king to protect her at all costs. When Hak asked about the king and discovered that he had been killed by Su-won, he was taken by anger and rushed at Su-won, demanding an answer about the reason for killing a king who hated wars, knowing that Su-won had never shown the will to take the throne. But for Su-won, the country did not need a weak king. Kai knew very well the strength of Hak, but since Yona was used as a hostage, Hak had to surrender and he was surrounded. But suddenly an arrow came from nowhere, helping him to break free and escape together with Yona. They encountered Minsu, who had fired the arrow, and Hak entrusted Yona to Minsu's care while he opened the way. The trio ended up finding a hiding place, but escaping was extremely difficult because of the number of guards. So Minsu decided to create a distraction, since nobody suspected his loyalty. Minsu dressed in the cloak of the princess and ran outside to deceive the guards. Hak used the moment of distraction caused by Minsu to escape from the fortress together with Yona. Unfortunately, Minsu ended up being struck by the arrows of the archers and could not escape. Thus, Hak and Yona managed to run into the forest, while Su-won ordered his soldiers to patrol the area, even knowing that it would be very difficult for them to find anything. Knowing every corner of that forest, Hak used that to his advantage, and he decided to let the princess rest in safety right there among the trees. On the following morning, people began to notice that something was changing in the country, while Su-won continued without news from his soldiers. Hak and Yona chose to leave, believing that as long as they were together and alive, they could start over anywhere. Yona wished that Hak would remain by her side, and he embraced her, bringing comfort for that difficult moment. After some time living hidden in the forest, Hak realized that Yona was getting weaker and weaker, since she had never gone through difficulties of that kind before. In the past, Hak was the grandson of a famous general who caught the attention of the king, who invited him to become his future general. But Hak refused because he did not want to get involved with disputes and games of the court, which he strongly despised. And he also wanted to avoid any kind of contact with Yona, because he always lost focus when he was near her. But in one of those attempts to avoid her, Yona ended up hiding behind him right after being bothered by Taejun, who is the son of the chief of the Fire Tribe. It was at that moment that Hak realized Yona had feelings for Su-won, but that she preferred to keep that a secret. Later, Hak asked his grandfather to take him away, but he did not accept, and that allowed Yona to go after him. She apologized for having made Hak upset because of her shyness and brought some fruits to make peace with him, and after that she left. Soon after, Hak heard the soldiers commenting that the king was limiting his own power. But he quickly saw Taejun provoking the princess, and in order to defend her, he had to intervene since Taejun exaggerated a lot in his joke. To drive Taejun away, Hak pretended to be very close to Yona, and after that he decided to take on the role of Yona's protector and revealed himself to be the future leader of the Wind Tribe. The king appeared to calm the situation and acknowledged that Hak would be an excellent guardian for the princess. From that moment on, Hak began to see the king with different eyes, for he had the courage to intervene personally and even get hurt to stop Taejun. This made Hak remember the time when the queen had passed away, and at that time both the king and Yona were devastated. But the princess decided to be strong in order to support her father. Sun Won and Hak also wanted to help Yona feel calmer with the loss. So they played at a snowball fight, and the result was that Yona ended up catching a cold. She wanted her father to visit her, but the court physician warned that he was busy, and it did not take long before Hak and Sun Won also became sick. Then Hak's grandfather went to see how they were doing, and Sun Won admired Hak's grandfather and dreamed of becoming a general like him. Meanwhile, Hak told them that he was an orphan raised by his grandfather. Sun Won's father ended up appearing there as well, and that made Yona even sadder, since the king himself had not come. Many people believed the king avoided visiting his daughter for fear of falling ill. Hak, however, said that he respected the king, since he always placed the duties of the country first. Yona heard this and stopped blaming her father. Later that night, Yona felt hungry and Sun Won arranged some food for her. But the gruel was terrible, until the king entered and revealed that he himself had prepared the food, trying to make up for not having come earlier. Yona made a point of eating everything, valuing that gesture. Back in the present, we see Yona dreaming of Hak and of Sun Won. In the dream, she wished they could stay together with her forever. But after waking up, she had no choice but to face the harsh reality. Hak noticed that Yona was merely existing, almost like a ghost, not only physically exhausted, but also emotionally destroyed. This made Hak begin to harbor a deep resentment towards Sun Won for causing the princess so much suffering. He found the hairpin that Sun Won had once given to Yona and decided to keep it. Later, Yona searched for the hairpin, but Hak did not show her anything. She tried to forget her feelings for Sun Won, but she could not. Yona ended up going outside and coming face to face with a poisonous snake. Hak had to rescue her from danger, and after that he returned the hairpin to her, since it was the only object that seemed to give the princess strength in that moment. The two remained in the forest until Yona noticed that Hak had been bitten by the snake, but he said it was nothing serious, and not knowing where else to go, Hak decided to return to his homeland, since even the villages could be dangerous because of the soldiers. Arriving at the Wind Tribe, the people were surprised by Hak's return. They did not know Yona and thought she was just a young woman he had brought home as his girlfriend. Hak asked for food to give Yona and wanted to know where his grandfather, Mundak, was. They said the palace had summoned the 5 former generals for a meeting, and it was then that Hak noticed that no one knew what had happened at the castle. At that moment, the 5 generals were gathered, and the leader of the Fire Tribe interrogated Hak's grandfather, since many rumors claimed that Hak had killed the king and kidnapped the princess. At that point, Songwon appeared and cleared Hak of all blame, but also did not take responsibility for the crime against the king. Songwon argued that the tribes needed to unite against external threats, and all the leaders supported his choice to take the throne. Hak's grandfather preferred not to give an opinion, since he was no longer the general, but rather Hak, who now held that position. Therefore, if an opinion was required, they should consult him. Kai warned the old man that he could be accused of treason if he remained silent, since in the past he had treated Songwon as a grandson, so now he chose not to take a position. Songwon declared that in 3 days he would hold his coronation and expected his presence. Later, we discovered that the chief of the Fire Tribe had secretly supported Songwon to become king. They knew Hak would not act on impulse, for he would not want Yona to be at risk and create turmoil in the kingdom. Songwon asked the chief of the Fire Tribe to make preparations to contain the supposed rebellion of the Wind Tribe. Meanwhile, Yona regained her senses and met a boy named Yun, who was almost like a younger brother to Hak. Yun asked her what kind of relationship she had with Hak, and she answered that they were just friends. The other boys immediately joked, saying Hak had been rejected, since Yona did not see him as a boyfriend. Hak then explained to Yona what identity she should assume at that moment. After finishing their meal, Yona decided to go out for a walk and ended up being approached by an elderly woman. She had heard from Hak that Yona had worked as a servant in the palace, but could not handle the service and was therefore dismissed. The old lady offered to help Yona work and put her to assist in the laundry tasks. Soon after, Hak appeared to help, and the two realized that the stream supplying the village was completely dry. Hak then sent some villagers to assess the situation further upstream. At that moment, Hak's grandfather, Mundok, arrived at the village. One of the men sent by Hak returned with some injuries, reporting that the fire tribe had blocked the water of the stream at its source, preventing the village from being supplied, and upon knowing the reason, Hak's grandfather forbade any rash actions from the villagers, since the fire tribe was being pressured because he had not acknowledged Suwon as the new king. Hak's grandfather had already decided not to allow Suwon to take the throne, because if Hak reappeared, he would be blamed for killing the former king. Meanwhile, Taejun showed up again, resentful, believing he might still have a chance with Yona and that he could even have been king if Hak had not ruined everything. Yona was distracted when Yun called her for dinner, but she suddenly fainted. Hak and his grandfather explained to Yona that Yun had always been fragile since he was a child and frequently needed medicine. Right at that moment, they learned that a caravan of merchants had been attacked, leaving the village without medicine and without water. Everyone realized it was a trap from the fire tribe. But even so, Hangdi said he knew the medicine and offered to go retrieve it for Yun. Hak allowed him to go and instructed everyone not to provoke the fire tribe, since they were at a disadvantage. Even more so now that the fire tribe had the support of the royal family. After that, Hak called Yona to speak alone, and she kept wondering what she should do in that situation. Hak said that he wanted her to remain there and live in peace, then went to talk to his grandfather to resolve everything. Hak suggested that his grandfather should accept Suwon's coronation and take back his title of general, while he himself would leave the tribe, freeing her from persecution. Even aware that he would be considered a traitor, he accepted that fate and asked his grandfather to allow Yona to stay there and live a quiet life. Hak's grandfather refused to allow such a life for his grandson, so Hak used his authority as leader of the tribe to make a decision. That night, Hak went to the weapon shop, said farewell to some people, and took some equipment. During this, Hangdi returned with medicine and managed to save Yun. Later, Yona spoke with the elderly lady and went to the attacked caravan. She realized she was putting everyone in the village at risk and decided to leave. And the next day, Yona went after Hak, but discovered that he had already said his goodbyes to Yun. Yun cried a lot and thanked Yona for the days they had spent together, realizing that she too was leaving. Yona had made a promise to Hak to take care of Yun, but now she herself was going away. Meanwhile, Hak was saying farewell to his subordinates at the gate and asked them to take care of Yona. However, Yona decided to follow him, even though Hak insisted that she stay and live a peaceful life. Yona chose to travel alongside him. Hak warned that he was no longer her general, so if she wanted his protection, she would have to pay him in some way. Since she had nothing to give him, he tried to convince her to remain with the Wind tribe, and Hak's grandfather raised his bow, thinking that his grandson was once again disrespecting Yona. In the end, she ended up accepting that she would follow Hak, and meanwhile, Taejun learned where Hak and Yona were and set out to search for them. Hak and Yona followed his grandfather's advice, seeking out a priest who had once been the counselor of the former king, but had isolated himself after being disappointed with the kingdom's path. The two arrived in a mountainous region, and Hak warned that it would be difficult to spend the night there. To avoid the cold, Yona decided to sleep close to him, but he warned that he could not guarantee comfort. And suddenly Hak pulled Yona aside to hide because he sensed the approach of enemies. They came face to face with Taejun's group, who was surprised to find them so soon. Hak said that he was no longer a general, so it would not affect the Wind tribe. But even so, Taejun ordered the attack. However, Hak easily took everyone down, and when the archers began shooting from a distance, Hak grabbed Yona and ran, blocking the arrows along the way. Yona ended up tripping, but Hak protected her, taking an arrow in her place and escaping with her soon after. As the day went on, they managed to shake off the pursuit for a while, but Hak decided to go out and fight, leaving Yona hidden. Soon, Hak was surrounded, while Yona realized that the arrow had been poisoned and he could pass out at any moment. She didn't want to get involved, but understood that if she kept depending on him, she might as well have stayed in the Wind tribe. So she gathered her courage, took down an archer, and came face to face with Taejun. He even offered to take her back and remove Suwon from the throne, but she questioned why he still stood by Suwon despite knowing everything he had done against the Wind tribe. She called Taejun a hypocrite and said she would never accept going with him. Taejun was impressed by Yona's strength, since she used to be so fragile, and Hak scolded her for putting herself at risk, but because of the poison, he grew dizzy and collapsed. He still tried to fight, but was struck and pushed to the edge of a cliff. Hak fell, but managed to cling to the ledge, and Yona tried to pull him up. Taejin grabbed her by the hair, but Yona cut her own hair with a sword to break free and save Hak. Taejin did not allow the soldiers to harm Yona, so they just watched as she saved Hak. Still, she couldn't lift him, and the two of them fell off the cliff together. Taejin ordered his soldiers to search for them, but he doubted they had survived the fall. That night, Taejin went to see Soo-won and handed over a lock of Yona's hair that had been left with him. He told him everything that happened and was convinced that she was dead. In truth, he only wanted to capture Yona to bring her back, but everything spiraled out of control. Taejin asked to be punished, but Soo-won simply turned his back and walked away. Meanwhile, a stranger found Hak and Yona in the forest. Finally, the day of Soo-won's coronation arrived. Kai mentioned that both Hak's grandfather and the new general had come to attend the event, and Soo-won showed interest in meeting them. He remembered that in the past, whenever he went to see Yona, Hak was always there waiting, and he greatly admired Hak's strength to the point of wanting him as a personal guard. That was why Hak even suggested that Soo-won marry Yona and take the throne. Thus, Soo-won had always been conflicted about the idea. He understood that if he ever became king, he could no longer be near Yona and Hak as before. Even so, he believed that by leaving those things behind, he became who he is today. At the coronation ceremony, Soo-won reflected on the different clans. The Fire Clan, loyal but always hungry for power. The Earth Clan, who only supported whoever was in charge. The Water Clan, who waited for the best chance to act. And the Wind Clan, filled with skilled warriors trained by Hak's grandfather, and therefore capable of rebellion at any moment. Soo-won knew he needed to unite all these clans in order to protect the kingdom from external threats. Hak's grandfather asked Soo-won what he had to give up in order to seize the throne. He replied that his mission was to restore the kingdom's greatness not by relying on gods, but on the people themselves, and if anyone opposed him, he would find a way to deal with it. Hak's grandfather was surprised by Soo-won's new resolve. Meanwhile, Yona had woken up and met Eun, the one who had saved her and Hak. Eun explained that Hak had been seriously injured protecting her during the fall from the cliff, and if help had come any later, he would not have survived. Yona also met an eccentric man named Iksu. She hesitated about whether to reveal her true identity, but Iksu already knew who she was. From Eun's words, Yona realized that he was the priest Hak's grandfather had spoken of. Iksu said that his role was to deliver the words of the gods to the people, but according to Eun, those cryptic messages were precisely why Iksu had been exiled from the capital. Yona grew curious and wanted to understand all of it better, which made Eun notice that even though she had lived in the palace, she knew very little about the world. Soon after, Yona realized Hak was waking up, but Eun warned her that Hak had a fever, and without proper medicine, his recovery would take a long time. Yona remarked that since Eun was no expert in medicine, there wasn't much hope, especially because she herself had never thanked anyone, not even Hak. He risked everything to save her, and that was also one of the reasons why Eun didn't like nobles or royalty very much. But Iksu reassured her, saying that the god of death hadn't come to take him yet. Later, the two of them went for a walk, and Yona asked why Iksu had chosen to live there. He replied that he was simply following the flow of life, and believed that everything happens for a reason. That same night, Yona went to thank Eun for saving her life, and wanted to know more about his past. Eun revealed that he was just someone who took care of the priest. In the past, being a priest was so important that not even a king could disobey them. They were seen as intermediaries of the gods, capable of influencing the government, starting wars, or even overthrowing the king if he displeased the gods. That was why they eventually became a threat to the royal family, and it was Soo-won's father who ordered Iksu to be expelled from the palace, fearing he might interfere with the reign of the former king. The reason Eun had taken Iksu to such a distant place was because Iksu was far too kind, always helping others even at the cost of harming himself. That's why they ended up living there. That same night, Yona realized Hak was missing. She ran out, trying to find him, calling his name, but he had only gone to retrieve his sword. Yona was sad that he hadn't asked her to go with him. Badly wounded after protecting her, Hak told her that if he were to die, he wanted to see how much she would cry for him. Yona didn't want to be left behind by Hak ever again, and when he came closer, she bumped her forehead against his. She thought he was trying to check if she had a fever, so she offered her forehead, and he played along. Noticing how inexperienced Yona was with romance, Hak apologized for making her cut her hair, but she said she never cared much about it, so she didn't regret it. Still, Hak noticed she was still keeping her hairpin. The next day, Hak realized exactly where they were: the priest's house. Yona went to talk to Iksu, and he asked if she wanted to hear the voice of the gods. Hak's grandfather had already suggested that she seek Iksu to find out which path to follow. But now, after everything that had happened, all she wanted was to live a peaceful life at Hak's side. However, Iksu told her she would be the storm that would change the fate of the country. After that, Yona and Hak sat together, and Iksu revealed the god's prophecy. When the 4 dragons gather, the true king will emerge. Hak didn't believe such stories, but they needed to be told. They say that the Scarlet Dragon King, a dragon god transformed into a human, was the first king of the nation, but he was betrayed and deposed by humans themselves. Then the 4 dragons came to save him and thought about destroying all of humanity, but he begged them to spare everyone. So, they created 4 warriors to protect him. One with powerful claws, another with eyes that could see everything, one who could leap higher than anyone else, and the last with immense strength. They united the 4 clans and served the king until his death, after which they disappeared without leaving a trace. Iksu believed Yona was in danger and needed more allies besides Hak. Since he couldn't protect her alone, she would have to find more companions among the legendary dragon warriors. Even if it was just a legend, descendants of those warriors truly existed, so it was time for Yona to seek them. According to Iksu, the gods had already shown the path, and now she had the power to move forward. He also said that the fact Yona had survived so many things was proof she had a special destiny. But while Hak carried everything alone, no one said anything. That night, Yona thought about throwing away the hairpin, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Later, she met Hak again, and he wanted to know if she truly wished to follow the path Iksu had pointed out. But Yona was already determined to seek the dragon warriors and asked Hak to teach her how to fight. Since she didn't want to be a burden to him, he agreed if that was really what she wanted. Iksu then asked them to take Yun along on their journey, and he even trimmed Yona's hair. Yona realized that Yun was really very smart and seemed to know everything. Yun said he could memorize any book after reading it just once, and the reason he studied so much was to take care of Iksu, but he made it clear that he wouldn't do anything for free and would charge for it. So Yona suggested sending the bill to Hak's grandfather. That was when she realized Hak's grandfather was someone beyond being the head of the Wind Tribe, just like Suwon's father, but for her, he had always just been that kind old man who loved children. Yun had always wanted to explore the world and learn different stories. At one point, Yona spoke with Iksu and confessed that she didn't want to separate him from Yun, since the two of them were practically a family, and the idea of pulling them apart was far too painful for her. Even so, Yun ended up overhearing everything and later went to confront Iksu. But Iksu explained that he didn't want to be a burden, he wanted Yun to have the chance to see what existed beyond that place, and he trusted he could manage on his own without Yun around. Thinking about that, Yun almost threw away an old book of remedies that Iksu had once given him, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Just then, Hak appeared to prepare a fish for them. Yun asked why Hak went to such lengths to protect Yona. Putting aside his own safety, Hak answered that she was the most important person in his life. After that, Yun went to reflect by a waterfall and remembered when he was a child in a fire tribe village, so poor that he had to steal food to survive. One time, he crossed paths with Iksu and tried to rob him, but Iksu had nothing and only offered kindness. Because of that, Yun allowed him to sleep in his house that night and later even treated the wounds he had caused. The next day, Iksu gave Yun a sweet potato to ease his hunger. Yun realized that Iksu had probably gone without his own shoes in order to get that food, and he wondered how someone could be so generous. Iksu explained that all kinds of people existed in the world, and that he rarely went to the capital. Yun had always dreamed of changing his life, of going to the capital and having greater access to knowledge. Despite his hardships, he knew how to read and always had a thirst for learning. Iksu promised to help him pursue that dream and said his role was to ease people's suffering by following the god's will. He also taught Yun how to make straw sandals, and Yun became determined to keep learning at Iksu's side, but eventually, Iksu left, leaving Yun with only the hope of seeing him again. Over time, Yun managed to earn money by selling the sandals he made until, one day, he reunited with Iksu. Ik-soo told him he had searched for books to give Yun, but they had all been taken already. Feeling defeated, he thought of visiting Yun one last time before withdrawing from people altogether, but Yun chose to follow him instead and stay by his side, and so they began living together. Later, in the present, Ik-soo went to find Yun and gave him a pair of handmade sandals. Even though they weren't very good, Yun also made a new pair for Ik-soo. Thanks to them, Ik-soo was able to walk on his own despite the difficulty. Yun then realized that Ik-soo really could take care of himself, so he decided to leave with him in spirit and follow his decision. Soon after, the group prepared to travel again, and Hak was surprised by how many things Yona carried with her. She showed everything to Hak and said her goodbyes to Ik-soo, promising to return soon. Ik-soo said he would be fine living alone, and with that, Yona went ahead, guiding Hak, while Hak finally accepted her presence on the journey. On the other side, Soo-won was dealing with dishonest nobles and ordered Kai to take care of them. The former king had been weak, and many ambitious men had taken advantage of that, so Soo-won needed to put an end to it. He found a book about the Crimson Dragon King and remembered the past, but he believed the country didn't need a legendary king to be restored. Meanwhile, Yona's group continued their journey, trying to reach the border of the empire. Following Ik-soo's advice, the dragon warriors were known to constantly move from place to place, making them hard to find. There was a guardian tribe of the dragon's bloodline, isolated on a mountain near the border, and that was their first destination. Hak stayed alert whenever anyone came near Yona, afraid someone might recognize her. Though he was overthinking, it wasn't as if everyone knew who she was. Yona wanted Hak to relax, especially since he hadn't even fully recovered. She wanted to experience what life was like outside the palace walls. On the way, they stopped in a village to rest and eat. Hak went shopping and told Yona that if anything went wrong, they should meet by the big tree. He also visited a weapon shop to buy a bow, and even thought about getting a knife for Yona to defend herself, but gave up, since he believed he could protect her himself. At that time, Yona learned that Soo-won had fully taken the throne and felt relieved to hear that Hak's grandfather and the Wind tribe were doing well. The shopkeeper asked if she wanted anything else, but Yona had already left. Soon after, they spotted members of the Fire tribe and reunited with Hak. Realizing the situation, he decided it was best not to stay there for long. On the road, they overheard people talking about the new government. They said taxes had become lighter, but what bothered them was the overwhelming presence of Fire tribe soldiers everywhere. Yona preferred to cross through the forests since she didn't have to worry about the palace's watchful eyes. She once again asked Hak to teach her how to fight in the forests, but he refused, saying she should only learn if she was truly ready to defend herself or harm an enemy if necessary. Yona explained that she only wanted to learn so she could escape in case of danger, so Hak handed her the bow and asked her to stay behind him, helping from a distance in battles. If they weren't traveling, he said, he would make Yona practice 200 arrows every day, and he also wanted her to think about the reason why her father had never wanted her to fight. Hak let her practice aiming at birds and rabbits, but after a long time, she still hadn't hit anything. He showed her how it was done, but he didn't know how to explain it properly since, for someone with talent, it's hard to teach a beginner. Yona thought he didn't know how to teach, but Hak knew the real challenge was her lack of strength to pull the bowstring. Once she overcame that weakness, she would learn on her own. Even so, Yona stayed committed to her training, trying to make the arrows fly. Hak noticed that she was so determined that she even trained at night, which greatly improved her technique, even though her hands were injured from so much practice. Hak understood archery a little himself, but he didn't use it because he believed that someone truly resolved should only wield a sword. Whoever decides to pick up a weapon must accept the weight of taking a life, and if they hesitate or aren't prepared, the cost could be high. Hak's secret to survival was showing mercy to his enemies. The next day, they continued their journey when Yona suddenly stopped on the road, wanting to hit a wild boar. She understood that when you pick up a weapon, you must be ready to take something from another living being. She knew her father would never approve of that, but at that moment, it was a matter of survival. Yona tried to shoot the boar but missed, and Hak then told Yun to go ahead. Hak even told Yona that she didn't yet have the courage to kill. She could hit things, but not living beings. He suggested she aim at him, imagining he was chasing her. Hak was confident he could easily dodge her arrows, so Yona shot. But when he told her to imagine he was Soo-won, the arrow passed so close it cut his face. Hak realized Yona needed more practice and emphasized that the most important thing was for her not to worry so much, but to protect him, because that was her mission. Soon after, the two went after Yun, and Yona noticed his luggage had been left on the ground. Then, they began hearing voices telling them to leave. Hak used his weapon to disperse the mist, revealing mountain villagers. They noticed Yona's red hair and asked who she was. Yona explained they were there following the priest's guidance, searching for the 4 dragon warriors. They told her this was the village of the dragon, where the descendants of the white dragon lived. Meanwhile, Yun was locked in a cage, coughing so Yona and Hak wouldn't end up in the same situation. But soon, the 2 of them were also taken to the place. However, instead of being truly captured, when Yona spoke, they released her. Hak commented that everyone's attitude changed after seeing her red hair. The elder apologized for being rude to Yona's friends. Hak and Yona also noticed how these people treated her red hair as something extremely special. They knew her hair resembled that of the person the first white dragon had served, so they believed she was the chosen one. Hak asked if everyone in the village was a descendant of the white dragon, but only one person had inherited his power. This man appeared, showing an arm larger than the other, and the elder had always cared for him. However, he didn't know what his power meant without his master's appearance. There was no guarantee that the true master of the white dragon would appear soon. It could still take a long time. That's why the elder suggested he find a wife to keep the white dragon's bloodline alive. But for now, he didn't think much about that. At that moment, the white dragon warrior grew interested in what was happening in the village after discovering the presence of strangers. He showed up, assuming they were there to cause trouble. The white dragon confronted the visitors, and meanwhile, Yona took the knife she had borrowed from Hak, trying to summon the courage to persuade the white dragon to join their group. But when he saw her armed, the white dragon became even more certain she was a threat. He approached, but upon seeing Yona's red hair, he was completely shocked. The dragon's blood reacted in a different way, bringing to the surface the memory of his father. The white dragon needed to use his strength to serve the heir of the Crimson Dragon King. The white dragon had no idea when that person would appear, but his father believed that at the right time, the white dragon would recognize his master instantly, and that would mark the beginning of a new journey. The white dragon then understood and accepted Yona as his leader, making the entire village bow before her. Yona realized that, in a way, her red hair made the white dragon believe she was the Crimson Dragon King, but she herself did not see herself as a queen, only as someone borrowing the strength of the 4 dragons. Still, it didn't matter who she was. The white dragon decided to follow her, and his blood confirmed it. After that, the white dragon informed the elder that he would depart immediately, but the elder insisted on holding a celebration before their departure. During the feast, Yona was surprised at how easily the white dragon had accepted the mission, while Hak went to request some supplies to help with the journey. However, the white dragon only handed him a bag of money, saying Hak's job was over and that he could return home. Hak didn't like the idea at all and replied that a noble like the white dragon could take care of the princess. They carried that competitive tension in front of Yona, with Hak calling the white dragon useless and suggesting they search for another ally. Yona demanded to know what had happened and discovered that the white dragon had tried to pay Hak to leave. Hak refused the offer but still held on to the money, while the white dragon insisted Hak was not a dragon warrior and therefore useless. But Yona declared that she needed Hak and emphasized how essential he was to her. This made the white dragon think Hak was weak, since they needed the dragons to protect the princess. But Hak shot back that he wasn't so weak that he had to rely on a white lizard. That night, a celebration was held. The elder, who had cared for generations of white dragons, finally saw one of them departing to fulfill his mission. The next day, the white dragon joined Yona's group, surprising everyone in the village. The elder gave them plenty of supplies for the journey, though he was saddened because he would no longer be able to wake the white dragon every morning. He knew time was passing, but he wished to live long enough to see him return. The group set off again, still without clues about the other 3 dragon warriors, but the white dragon revealed he felt a special connection to the others, even without having met them. Yona asked his real name, and he was surprised to hear someone ask that. His name was Kija. During the journey, Hak kept teasing Kija, and Yona had to step in, asking Hak not to pick fights with him and asking the white dragon to ignore Hak's provocations. She also asked Kija in which direction he sensed the nearest dragon, and Kija concentrated, pointed the way, and tried to lead only to immediately fall into a hole full of centipedes, proving he had no real experience with the outside world. Yona told him to stay further back from then on. After pulling him out, both Kija and Hak sensed enemies nearby. Yona and Yun hid, while Hak thought they might be from the Fire Tribe, but they turned out to be simple bandits. The two warriors rushed forward without hesitation. The bandits believed they could win just because they had numbers. But Kija unleashed the power of his dragon arm and joined the fight. Hak was impressed with the dragon's strength but didn't want to be left behind, so he also showed off his full skill. Kija then went after Hak again for calling him a lizard, and though they didn't get along, both recognized that the other fought well. Yona also wanted to participate in the battle. Yun asked her if she wanted to be useful in the fight, then taught her how to aim and shoot. With his guidance, she managed to drive off a bandit who had tried to attack Hak from behind. She hit the target, and Yun's instructions were easy to follow, but when it came to actually shooting with a bow, his skill was much less impressive. Afterward, they managed to drive off the bandits, but Kija realized his dragon arm had lost its strength. Hak then collapsed as an old wound reopened, and Kija was impressed that Hak had fought so fiercely despite being badly injured. That's when Kija picked Hak up, carrying him with the overwhelming strength of his dragon arm. But it was really only that arm that was strong, while the other remained weak as always. Kija also noticed that Yona was very brave, since she showed no fear in front of the bandits and even tried to protect Hak. She said that she had already gone through something terrible, and from then on nothing seemed frightening anymore. That made Kija sincerely want to accompany the princess, who showed herself to be a girl full of determination. That same night, Kija was shocked to see that their meal consisted only of plants gathered from the forest. Even so, Yona did not complain, because her food was still better than Hak's. Hak had already woken up, and Yona wanted to feed him herself, but Kija quickly offered to do it, preventing the princess from putting food directly into Hak's mouth. Yun then took the chance to ask Kija where the next dragon, the famous blue dragon, could be found. According to Kija, that clan once lived with the Earth Tribe, but suddenly disappeared. Even though they had vanished, Kija could still feel the blue dragon's presence, so he was certain he was alive. Yun then managed to estimate where the blue dragon might be, and they decided to investigate the nearby villages the next day. For Kija, it was a shock to learn they would be spending the night out in the open forest. By the next day, Kija looked like a zombie from lack of sleep. Yun warned the group there was a risk of running into the Fire Tribe, so they needed to act cautiously. But that was practically impossible since they were traveling with a red-haired girl, a former general, and a man with a giant dragon arm. Hiding that trio was nearly impossible. Thinking about this, Yun suggested a new plan near each village. Kija would try to sense the dragon's presence, and if he felt nothing, they would leave quickly without wasting time. Hak, who had an excellent memory for locations, pointed out areas that were Fire Tribe military bases, places that obviously weren't worth searching for the blue dragon. This made the search much easier. Even so, they spent an entire day searching without finding the blue dragon. Kija kept pointing in the same direction, which made them think the blue dragon hadn't crossed the border. Later, noticing Yona's exhaustion, Yun gave her a drink to help her rest. That night, Kija felt a heavy burden, thinking he hadn't helped the princess at all and had only made everyone waste their energy. He wished the blue dragon would sense his presence and come on his own. But then the sound of Yona practicing archery in the middle of the night woke him up. Hak explained to Kija that even though Yona had protection, she insisted on training by herself so she'd be ready in case something happened. The next morning, Yona asked if Kija had slept well, knowing he wasn't used to sleeping outdoors like that. Little by little, Kija realized he was starting to like Yona, and she began to see him as someone essential. At that moment, Yona concluded that the blue dragon was probably hiding in a place outside the maps, very close to the border, making him nearly impossible to find. After some time, the group arrived at a very isolated village near the Empire's border. As soon as they got there, the villagers came out to see who the newcomers were. Kija immediately realized that the blue dragon was there, but the villagers were not part of the old clan. They were just a humble, unknown tribe. Yona decided not to pressure anyone, and only asked if they could spend the night there so Hak could recover properly. The elder allowed it, but warned them that the village was like a labyrinth, so it wasn't a good idea to go out alone, or they'd risk getting lost. Yona asked about the villagers' masks, and the elder explained it was a tradition for those who weren't married yet. They all took the group to their resting place, but the group decided to explore and try to find the blue dragon. They searched but only found paths that led nowhere. Suddenly, Yun felt that they were being watched and feared the group would be discovered, so he suggested they retreat. On the way back, Yona stumbled upon a secret tunnel and entered it alone without even warning Hak. Following the tunnel, she found a squirrel and got distracted chasing the little creature. Not realizing she had completely separated from the group, the lights went out, and suddenly she came face to face with a man who promised to help her get out. After walking for a while, Yona began to grow suspicious and tried to escape, when suddenly a masked person appeared and saved her. She noticed that the masked man was the squirrel's owner. Meanwhile, Hack and the group were searching for Yona. She was returned to the group, and Kija immediately realized that the one who had brought Yona back was the Blue Dragon himself. But the man fled quickly without saying a word. In the past, when the Blue Dragon was born, a mask had been placed on him because his power resided in his eyes. The villagers didn't see the Blue Dragon as a hero, but rather as a curse. Since childhood, the Blue Dragon had lived together with his predecessor, and both of them suffered rejection from everyone in the village. The former Blue Dragon also showed no affection, believing that paralyzing people with his gaze was nothing but a burden. Over time, the villagers exaggerated the stories, making the power seem more and more frightening, and whenever one Blue Dragon died, another would be born right there. The current one noticed that his eyes were growing stronger while the former gradually lost his sight. Both of them protected the village from external attacks, and the older one wanted to teach swordsmanship to his successor so that he could defend himself more easily. Even though he was harsh, the former Blue Dragon only wanted the new one to have a less painful life, so he asked him never to use the power of his eyes. He trained his successor in swordsmanship, and when he eventually lost his sight completely, he felt relieved, as though freed from the curse, and was able to die as an ordinary man. The new Blue Dragon attached bells to his mask so he could be found by sound. Not long after, the former Blue Dragon died, and many enemies attacked the village. Despite the warning, the current Blue Dragon decided to defend everyone, using his power to defeat all the invaders while trying to keep as much distance as possible. Yona realized that the Blue Dragon had a kind heart, while he himself felt great unease, because when he saved Yona, the dragon blood inside him reacted intensely similar to what happened with Kija, but he couldn't understand the reason for this reaction or to whom the voice in his mind belonged. He was surprised that his blood boiled when he immediately recognized Kija as the White Dragon. The main reason the Blue Dragon was hiding was his fear of revealing his ability again. He believed it would only bring suffering to those around him. At the same time, Kija was outraged that the villagers had separated Yona from the group. But Yun suspected that the true outsiders were actually the White Dragon and his people, and that both the Blue Dragon and the villagers saw them as intruders. Even so, Yona wanted to talk to the Blue Dragon once more, so she thought about returning to the tunnel. Kija and Yun decided to accompany her, although Hack preferred that she stay behind. Yona argued that Hack should remain to protect the villagers while she herself tried to convince the Blue Dragon to join the group. Before she left, Hack made Yona promise to return unharmed, or else he would never leave her side again. He also asked Kija to guarantee her safety and remain vigilant, knowing the villagers were keeping a close eye on them and standing firm to avoid problems. Inside the secret cave, Kija noticed they were being followed and told Yun and Yona to go ahead while he stayed behind to confront the villagers. They declared that no one should leave that path, but Kija replied that he was ready to fight if they tried to harm Yona. Meanwhile, Yun and Yona had already been located by the Blue Dragon. They met, and Yona asked for his name. He said he didn't have one, and even pointed his sword at her until the Blue Dragon's squirrel jumped onto Yona's lap, stirring in him a sudden, strong desire to know her better. When she asked to borrow his power, the Blue Dragon replied that anyone who wanted his power was his enemy, but Yona said she only wanted to know him and asked to be his friend. Still, the Blue Dragon believed his power was far too dangerous to be used in the world, and he asked Yona to leave. Not knowing how to insist, Yona and Yun had no choice but to retreat. Though the Blue Dragon longed for a friend, he always forced himself to abandon that desire. Even as she accepted leaving, Yona's heart grew heavy because of the Blue Dragon's situation. Afterward, she found Kija blocking the villagers, who wanted to attack Yona because their secret had been discovered. When she asked why they thought the Blue Dragon was a curse, no one answered, so Kija had to intervene. At that moment, the cave began to tremble and collapsed. Kija protected Yona, who ran off to help, but soon realized the path was blocked by rocks. Unable to move forward, He tried with all his strength to open the way. Meanwhile, Yona regained consciousness and saw that the villagers were trapped with them. Yun grew anxious, knowing that if they didn't act quickly, they would soon run out of oxygen. Kija used his claws to try to open an escape route, but the villagers panicked upon realizing there were even more dragons. Yona asked why such power was considered a curse, and the villagers explained that in their village, a child with the mark of the blue dragon was always born. Even if a child died, another mark would appear, and this terrified everyone because they feared their own children might be cursed. The fear was so great that they did not even covet this power. The terror came from the fact that the blue dragon, even as a child, had already defeated many soldiers with his strength. For that reason, they preferred to keep him isolated from the rest of the world. The blue dragon appeared, and the villagers were horrified, thinking Kija was about to take revenge, but instead, his mask was torn off, revealing a gentle face to Yona. The villagers still believed that looking directly into his eyes could turn a person into stone, so he quickly put the mask back on. The blue dragon picked up an axe and moved forward, not to attack, but to try to clear the stones so that everyone could escape. He told Kija that path would be faster, so Kija went to help him. Yona also joined in, and Ion urged the villagers to cooperate if they wanted to make it out alive. On the other side, the villagers tried to rescue a child trapped in the passage, and the blue dragon told them they would have to explain everything to him later. After much effort, Yona ran out of strength, so at Kija's suggestion, the blue dragon carried her in his arms so she could rest for a bit. Yona took the opportunity to share a little of her own story with the blue dragon, everything she had to endure after spending 15 years without ever leaving the palace, showing him that she had already survived through much. Once she had recovered, she returned to work, and the blue dragon began to realize that maybe he could be free if he stayed by her side. They resumed digging until Hack managed to break open a part of the wall from the other side. As soon as he saw Yona, he ran to embrace her, wishing that she would never have to go through anything like that again. After leaving the cave, Yona once again invited the blue dragon to travel with her. He finally understood that following Yona was a real chance at freedom, and so the blue dragon decided to join the group. But during the journey, the bell from his mask fell, and he chose to leave it behind, as if leaving his past behind to start a new beginning at Yona's side. Within this new group, the blue dragon remained a bit reserved, and Kija could no longer sense the presence of the other dragons because he was exhausted from using his power so much. Yun asked the blue dragon if he had the same ability to locate them, but he didn't know how to do that. Kija thought the reason was a lack of practice and offered to teach him. However, the blue dragon suddenly ran off, though in reality, he had only gone to a nearby stream to fish in order to help Kija recover. In the end, he grew cold, and the group decided to make a fire to warm up and cook food. When Yun finished cooking, the blue dragon tried the meal and surprised everyone by thanking Yona. What stood out the most was that, while everyone else called her princess, he called her by her name without hesitation. That night, Yun suggested giving the blue dragon a name, and he told Yona that since she was the one who had freed him from his loneliness, it should be her who chose a name. Even more so because it was clear the blue dragon already cared deeply for her. He had never felt fear, not even when she had once faced his blade. Yun confessed that he once looked at Yona with a certain disdain, as he always harbored resentment toward nobles and royalty. He then told her that he also wanted to call her simply by her name, Yona, and not Your Highness anymore, using the excuse that Your Highness was too long to say. Yona praised Yun, calling him cute. After that, Yona went to fetch water from the river and ran into Hack. Realizing he was following her, she asked him to keep calling her princess instead of by her name, because for her, only he should keep the memory that she had once been a princess and the king's daughter. Hack agreed and told her what had been going through his mind while he was digging through the rocks to rescue her. Yona then asked Hack to help her choose a name for the blue dragon. Hack felt that the dragon carried an energy tied to the night, and seeing him bathed in the moonlight, Yona decided to name him Shin Yar, but they would just call him Shin to make it simpler. The blue dragon accepted the name and seemed to like it very much. That night, while everyone else was asleep, Shin whispered to his squirrel that after so long, he finally had a name and would do everything to honor it. The next morning, Yona woke up and asked Kija how he was doing, and he said that he could now sense where the green dragon was. The group then set off in the direction Kija indicated. Since it was near the capital, Shin's long-range vision made all the difference because of his ability to see from very far away. They managed to continue along safer routes, avoiding any ambushes. Kija was already pleased for having befriended Shin, and along the way they came across a nearly abandoned village, with only a few starving villagers still remaining. It was a place devastated by the absence of water. Almost all the men had been summoned to serve in the capital's army, and thus the village had been neglected and forgotten by the nation. Disease spread rapidly, and those who were unable to leave ended up staying behind, slowly starving until the end. The situation reminded Yun of his own childhood, for the chief of the Fire Tribe only thought of strengthening the army, leaving his own people behind. At one point, the group helped a man they encountered on the road, and he told them that the previous king had been a terrible ruler, unable to handle the needs of his kingdom. Because of this, the tribes came to despise one another, and many people suffered without any support. The man only hoped the new king would bring change. Shortly after, Yona distanced herself from the group, saying she needed to use the restroom, but in truth it was just an excuse to be alone for a while. Yun also revealed that he had never held any respect for the former king, believing the world would most likely remember him as a naive dreamer who pursued peace excessively. Yet Hak had always admired him regardless. While Yona now carried only the weight of being that king's daughter, she sat down and cried, but Shin's squirrel approached her and managed to cheer her up, helping her feel better. Later that night, she awoke to practice archery, determined to grow stronger so she could protect those she loved. Meanwhile, Su-won had traveled to the territory of the Earth Tribe, where the tribe chief was troubled, feeling that his people were becoming increasingly forgotten. Few merchants came to trade, and their resources diminished more and more with each passing season. He felt that he had lost his vigor ever since Yona's father had become king and ended the conflicts. And so he received Su-won with suspicion, since he was the son of the man the chief had once admired as a model leader. Su-won requested to share tea with them, and he was accompanied by the Sky Tribe chief as well, two leaders who were exact opposites of one another. The moment they met, tension arose immediately, a subtle atmosphere of rivalry. The Earth Tribe chief noticed that Su-won seemed delicate, lacking the trustworthy air of a warrior, unlike his father. Wanting to know whether Su-won was truly capable, he agreed to walk with him through the territory. During this time, the chief was surprised to hear that the local mine had collapsed once again. His attendant also asked about the purpose of Su-won's visit, not believing it was merely sightseeing, but Su-won brushed the matter aside, saying he was only traveling. This prompted the Earth Tribe chief to speak directly. He demanded Su-won uphold his promise to restore the kingdom, stating that he could not trust such words, and warning that if he ever believed Su-won would bring ruin, he would not hesitate to lead a rebellion. Su-won understood and did not answer harshly, for he had indeed given his word. They continued their walk, and Su-won grew curious about the local worship of a sacred stone. The chief explained that it was simply an old tradition, after which he departed, suggesting Su-won speak with his servant if he needed anything further. The servant explained that the chief had lost his motivation, aimless in the time of peace, burdened by guilt for failing to protect his land. Su-won recognized that the Earth Tribe chief was still a respected figure, and realized he needed to awaken a sense of purpose in him once again. Soon afterward, the servant came back with news that a battle was about to begin, which greatly excited the chief. He rushed to find Su-won, only to discover it was merely a friendly competition. In truth, Su-won wanted to organize a festival and involve the entire population. The chiefs of Earth and Sky did not like the idea, thinking that Su-won was ignoring the kingdom's difficulties in favor of holding a celebration, and they feared he might rule even worse than the previous king. Nevertheless, the festival went on. The Earth Tribe chief disapproved of Su-won's clothing, finding it rather odd, but since it had been chosen by his wife, he could not refuse to wear it. At that moment, the chief discovered that his wife had become friends with Su-won after he complimented her tea. When he saw the people excited and eagerly waiting for the presentation to begin, he started to reconsider whether it truly held value. Su-won explained the rules of the game. Each team would have a leader, and participants would wear a bowl upon their head. If someone managed to break the opponent's bowl, they would score points depending on the class of their rival. There were three classes: commoners, nobles, and the king. Members of the same class could freely duel against one another, but there were restrictions between classes. A king could attack a noble but not a commoner. Nobles could strike commoners but not the king, and commoners could target the king but not the nobles. Whoever lost their bowl was eliminated, but could return if their team won a reserve. The winner would be the team that ended with the most bowls intact. Even then, the Earth Tribe chief doubted whether Su-won could fight at all. Despite being Hak's friend, for no one truly knew the extent of his strength. The Sky Tribe Chief remarked that the Earth Tribe Chief only paid attention to rough warriors and neglected men like Su Wan. When it came time to fight, Su Wan stepped onto the field, looking like nothing more than a thin and unimpressive young man. Still, he faced the challenge, yet suddenly turned and allowed the soldiers to take the lead. Those 5 soldiers were actually from the Earth Tribe, placed on Su Wan's team only to complete the numbers. They considered letting their chief win easily, but that would only tarnish his reputation. So in the end, they chose to obey Su Wan and give their best in the match. The chief, however, could not attack them back because they were of common origin, which forced a noble to intervene in order to support him. But soon another noble knocked that one down, and as the fight escalated into confrontations against nobles, the Earth Tribe Chief was finally free to act without restrictions, striking them down one after another. While Su Wan wandered across the battlefield searching for opponents, he was hunted by the commoners of the chief's team. Meanwhile, the Earth's forces ended up encountering the Sky Tribe Chief, since he too was a noble, and the Earth Chief gained the upper hand. Yet the Sky Chief was still permitted to defend himself, provided he protected his bowl from being broken. At that moment, Su Wan managed to shake off the 5 commoners pursuing him, tricking them into breaking one another's bowls in the confusion. He then rushed to free the prisoners, which immediately provoked the Earth Tribe Chief to advance upon him. Su Wan deflected a flying wooden sword that nearly struck the chief's face, and in that instant the chief realized that Su Wan was no ordinary person. He was concealing his true strength, pretending that it was all merely luck. Su Wan saved the prisoners, but this came with both advantages and disadvantages. On one side, he had gained more allies, but on the other, the rival team could now target them and earn more points by shattering their bowls. Once again, Su Wan was chased, leaving the chief uncertain whether he was truly skilled or simply fortunate. Shortly afterward, a gust of wind rose, scattering the chief's formation. The Earth Tribe soldiers fighting alongside Su Wan were asked who had devised such tactics, and they revealed that everything was Su Wan's idea. Even predicting the wind had been part of his strategy. The chief then understood he had judged Su Wan wrongly, realizing that he had deliberately guided the battle toward the Earth Tribe's defeat and had chosen only the most obedient of his men. In the end, the Earth Tribe was defeated, with only the chief himself surrounded. He looked at Su Wan and felt that the squirrel he had once seen now resembled a hawk, poised to strike. Su Wan gave them the chance to revive their soldiers and continue fighting in order to preserve their honor, but the chief refused, declaring that in a real war no one returned to life, and that even if left alone against 1,000 enemies, he would keep fighting. The chief then faced Su Wan in direct combat, yet during the clash Su Wan stumbled, and the chief took the opportunity to break the bowl upon his head, turning the match around by his own hand. A few days later, the chief still did not understand the true purpose of Su Wan's visit, until his wife explained that the tea she prepared had been purchased by merchants and presented in several major countries. Because of this, the plantation could not keep up with the demand. Su Wan suggested that the rarer a product is, the more expensive and valuable it becomes, and so she should maintain the tea as a regional specialty. At the same time, a man from the mines reported that they would need to expand, but there were not enough workers to handle the extraction. The stones that no one once cared for had now been transformed into jewels, thanks to the artisan's work, and the chief had proudly used them during the festival. With the problems of the region temporarily resolved, Su Wan decided to leave, and when the chief finally realized all that he had accomplished, it was already too late. Su Wan had departed. His true objective had been to secure the support of the Earth Tribe, for their morale was strong and, should a war arise, their strength would be essential. The chief came to trust Su Wan, seeing in him even greater potential than in his own father. Meanwhile, Yona's group arrived at the port city where Yun suspected they might find the Green Dragon's hiding place. Hak was already familiar with the area. While Kija was exhausted from the journey, Yun suggested they take a walk around the city to search for the Green Dragon, but moving all together would draw too much attention. For that reason, Hak chose to investigate alone. When Yona insisted on accompanying him, Hak refused, telling her she needed to rest since she had not been sleeping properly. He left the weapons with Yun and set off to explore the city on his own. Upon arriving, Hak noticed that the place looked even more desolate than before. Unknown soldiers were mistreating the townspeople, and Hak grew furious. he and a green-haired boy appeared in time to help a young woman, freeing her from the soldiers and managing to lead them away. The green-haired boy quickly left the woman in Hack's care and rushed off, as though in a hurry. Soon afterward, he returned to a ship in the harbor, where he met with the captain, who already knew he had stirred up trouble once again. But he also sensed the presence of the white dragon and the blue dragon nearby. At night, Hack returned to the group and decided that the next day he would go into town to buy supplies. Meanwhile, Yun and Kija had already realized that the green dragon was aboard an anchored ship. The following day, the two guided the group in search of the green dragon, while Hack chose to keep his distance, since he had not told the others about his earlier encounter with the soldiers and wanted to avoid creating more problems for everyone. Yun found it especially strange, since Hack almost never separated himself from Yona. But when Kija led the group to the ship where they had sensed the green dragon's aura, his presence suddenly vanished. At that same moment, the green dragon had already met Hack in the city. The green dragon confessed that he was being followed and asked Hack for help, so the two went into a tavern to talk. When Hack asked why the city looked like a ghost town, the green dragon explained that everything had grown worse after a certain lord had taken over, exploiting the people even more. Because he valued his freedom, he wanted to resist this oppression. Just then, Yun and Yona appeared and spotted Hack. He had to explain himself quickly, but by then the green dragon had already slipped away. Hack tried to justify his sudden departure to Yona, saying that the green dragon had sensed both the white dragon and another unfamiliar presence nearby. The green dragon had never liked the mission of protecting a master and hated being bound by it, so he was constantly running away. Meanwhile, Hack had to lead the group to avoid the soldiers, and during this they encountered once again the young woman whom Hack and the green dragon had helped earlier. She took them to her workplace, and Hack explained everything that had happened, including the fact that the city was under the command of a corrupt lord. The soldiers abused their power to oppress the people. They ruined shops, abducted beautiful women, and demanded absurd taxes just to allow trade, which had nearly destroyed commerce in the port city. Yona then understood why the people's smiles looked so false. When Yun asked about the pirates, the young woman explained that they had never harmed the townsfolk, only robbed the lord's ships. That same night, the green dragon infiltrated one of the lord's ships and discovered it was being used to transport narcotics. At that moment, his pirate crew appeared and attacked the cargo vessel. According to the stories that spread among the people, Yi-Ha, the green dragon, possessed a special ability, his powerful legs that allowed him to leap to incredible height. The pirate ship emerged victorious in the battle, and the captain ordered the local lord's cargo ship to be set ablaze. Even so, she made it clear to the crew that killing was strictly forbidden. They were only allowed to act when they had overwhelming advantage, ensuring their plans would never fail. Afterward, the captain noticed that Yi-Ha was unusually quiet, and he confessed that he could not stop thinking about how good it had felt to fight alongside Hack the previous night. Everyone in the crew already knew Yi-Ha well, but none of them resented him for his ties. In truth, he valued the crew deeply. 13 years earlier, he had left his village in search of freedom, and here he had finally found his place. The captain was preparing to assemble an even stronger force to strike decisively and overthrow the local lord. She needed every bit of strength she could gather, for she did not want to lose a single member of her crew, whom she considered her family. Knowing that Yi-Ha had crossed paths with Hack, she asked him to bring the warrior into their fight. Yi-Ha knew it would not be easy to convince Hack, since Hack was loyal to someone else at that moment, but the next day he returned to the city in search of him. At the same time, Hack and the group were also looking for the green dragon. When they witnessed soldiers harassing civilians, they could do nothing to intervene, so Yun pulled the group aside and explained that the soldiers were furious because the pirates had stolen their cargo the night before. If they interfered, it would only draw dangerous attention. Once the uproar settled down, the group moved on, but Hack separated himself again, since he was now being hunted in the city. Yi-Ha thought this would make it easier to speak with him, and after a while Hack encountered him again, discovering that Yi-Ha too was wanted, just like himself. The two tore down their wanted posters, and Yi-Ha began trying to convince Hack to join his crew, but Hack thought the man was far too strange, a suspicious person, and refused him, even striking him with a punch to push him away. Yet Yi-Ha rose once again and leapt at him, forcing Hack to flee. Hack returned to Yona's group, while Yi-Ha persisted in his resolve. Even knowing Hack already had a commitment, Yi-Ha remained determined to bring him over to his side. Not long after, however, he slipped and was spotted by Kija. Yona's group returned to the shop where the soldiers had attacked, and there they discovered that a child from the family had been killed. Yun checked the situation, but there was nothing left to be done. Yona was devastated, crushed by the thought that she had not been able to prevent such a tragedy. She resolved that if this place had been in chaos ever since her father's time, then she herself would be the one to bring peace to it. By then, Kija had already learned about Yiha's story, that he had even been trapped inside a vase. Kija carried the vase with him, but Yiha overheard that he would eventually need to meet the person he was destined to serve. Breaking free, he shattered the vase and escaped, declaring that he still had many dreams of his own and did not want to serve anyone. Soon after, Yiha went after Hack once more, introduced himself again, and pressed him to join his pirate crew. Hack kept refusing until Yona appeared. At that moment, Yiha could not resist. He fell to his knees, feeling a powerful energy rushing through his veins. He realized that she was the true master he was meant to follow, but at the same time he could not bring himself to leave. Yona sensed he was the Green Dragon, and Kija immediately confirmed it. Yiha understood then that the bond among the dragons was something he could not underestimate. Even so, he made it clear that he did not intend to become the princess's subordinate. But Yona explained that she was not here to force anyone, she was asking for his strength, and if he did not wish to join, she would respect that choice. When Yona learned that Yiha was a pirate, she asked to meet his captain, hoping to unite forces against the local lord. Since she was outraged by all the suffering in the city, Yiha agreed that the following day she could come with Hack to the ship. The night before, after speaking with Yun, the group prepared themselves, and the next morning they went to meet Yiha's captain. The captain, however, wanted to know what they were capable of, so she ordered everyone to be attacked at once. Hack and the dragons cut their way through the test without difficulty, and then she asked Yun about his skills. Even without being a fighter, he knew many things that could be useful. With Yona, though, the situation was different. She could not claim to excel at anything in particular, but the captain saw the determination in her eyes and decided to present her with a different kind of challenge. She tasked Yona with retrieving the herb known as the Celestial Blessing, and everyone was shocked. It was already difficult for trained men to do so. How could a princess succeed? But it was an order. This rare herb grew only on the edge of a steep cliff and possessed great healing power, crucial for the upcoming battle. Yona accepted immediately. Though the captain had not revealed the hardest detail, the herb grew on a cliff so sheer that Yona would have to go alone, without any help from Hack or the dragons. Even so, she agreed. Yiha guided her to the path, pointing out the narrow trail and explaining that she would have to climb down until she found a cave just wide enough for her body. Inside, she would find the herb. With courage, Yona began descending the cliff, clinging tightly to the rocks, until a powerful wind made her legs freeze with fear. Shin, Squirrel, and Yiha accompanied her from above, trying to calm her. In truth, even Yiha himself doubted whether she could succeed. If even he felt unsure, how could a young girl manage it? Yet the princess before him was far different from the one who had made him kneel earlier. Yiha questioned within himself whether Yona truly was the leader of the 4 dragons, and he shouted that she could give up. No one was forcing her, but Yona was determined not to turn back. Retreating would mean humiliation. Trembling with fear, she pressed on, explaining that this mission was actually her chance. If someone important were to be wounded in battle, the herb she retrieved could save lives. That was why she had to succeed, despite her fear not only of danger itself, but of losing the people she loved. Although the rule was that she had to go alone, Yiha followed discreetly from a distance, not helping but staying close enough to watch over her. At one point the path grew so narrow that even he could not pass, so from there Yona truly had to continue on her own. Steeling herself, she pressed forward, trying to calm her heart, until at last she found the Celestial Blessing herb. She called out to Yiha in triumph, but suddenly, a massive wave surged up and dragged her away. Yiha rushed to help. By sheer luck, she was still clinging to a vine. He tried to aid her, but she resisted, not wanting to break the promise she had made to the captain. Then another huge wave struck, and Yiha was forced to save her anyway. Both of them knew there would be no reproach for this. Besides, Yiha's own philosophy was simple. If a girl was in danger, he could never just stand by and watch. Hack and the group, anxious about Yona's situation, rushed to the cliff to look for her. When they saw how high it was, Kija was startled and deeply worried. Everyone wanted to climb down to rescue her, but the captain stopped them, explaining that the princess was enduring what was called the blessing of the heavens, meant to prove her courage. If they interfered now, they would have been undermining her strength. But Jaiha had already seen Yona returning from afar, and when she rejoined the group, she felt deeply relieved. She immediately handed the herb to the captain and admitted that she had not completed the trial on her own, since Jaiha had saved her in the end. For that reason, she wanted to attempt it again, but the captain was satisfied with Yona's honesty and said that if Jaiha had not saved her, she herself would have thrown him into the sea. Even so, the captain considered the mission accomplished, and Hak was reassured to see that she was safe. Jaiha then asked Hak if it was tiring to protect Yona in that way, since he always seemed exhausted. Hak replied that it was, and Jaiha commented that he had already grown old just from accompanying her. He even joked that, although he often got into trouble because of women, Yona was different, determined, and innocent, yet someone for whom he had already risked everything just to keep her safe. Jaiha even wanted to know what Hak's real relationship with Yona was, but Hak explained that he only wished to protect someone important, and even though they were close, Jaiha sensed that there was still a barrier between them. It seemed as if Hak avoided forming a deeper bond with Yona. Later, reflecting on this, Hak realized that he saw the princess as a younger sister, protecting the land that had once belonged to Su-won and to her. His whole life had been based on that commitment, and now, watching the princess fight day after day, Hak continued fulfilling the promise he had made to the king to protect her without expecting anything in return. Afterward, Hak went to check on the princess's hands, which had been injured while gathering the herb. He treated the cuts with honey, and as he applied it, he pondered Jaiha's words, realizing that he had always hidden his own feelings so as not to cross the line. Distracted, he let the honey drip and, without thinking, licked it from Yona's hand. The princess was startled and ran off, revealing that, deep down, those feelings were still alive. That night, Yona spoke with the captain, who told her that she intended to disband the pirates after the battle, because she no longer wished to see anyone she loved getting hurt. She only wanted to live in peace, and she also asked that, when everything was over, she be allowed to take Jaiha with her. Meanwhile, Yun noticed that several ships were moored at the harbor, 7 in total, all prepared for combat. The captain gathered everyone to devise a strategy, suspecting that the enemy had assembled such a fleet because of a major deal. The client was from Kai, and what was being transported were people, mostly women and children. The goal was to wipe out a band of pirates once and for all, and the captain showed them on the map where they would set up the ambush. The real difficulty was determining the right moment to strike and which ship carried the victims, for they would likely be used as shields. To create the right plan, more information was needed, since their aim was to eliminate those criminals who had caused so much harm. The next day, everyone was rushing to make preparations, and Yona still had not managed to contribute much. She asked if there was anything she could do, but the others were absorbed in their own tasks. Seeing this, Jaiha suggested that she should see the city, and he took her flying. From above, Jaiha spotted the local lord, and whenever people saw his carriage, they hid inside their homes. While flying, Yona noticed a disguised girl. When she approached, she discovered that the girl was hiding from the lord. A few days earlier, she had heard about an easy and well-paid job and went with a friend to a certain shop. Her friend, who was much prettier, was called into a private room, but after waiting for a while, she disappeared and never returned. Later, the girl learned that the shop belonged to the lord, and, fearing the guards, she disguised herself. Jaiha reassured her, saying that her friend had only been abducted, so there was still hope, and then he went to investigate the shop. An employee revealed that they would only be recruiting until late the next day, meaning this was their chance to act. If anyone of interest appeared, the lord would wait until the end, and the deal would take place on that very day. Now the challenge was to find a way to rescue the victims. Yona volunteered for the mission, offering to board one of the ships in disguise and send the signal to the team. Hak and the others naturally disagreed, saying it was far too dangerous and that if she were discovered, she would be killed. But she explained that there was no time to inspect ship by ship, and the most important thing was to save lives. Yona convinced them all, and the captain accepted the plan, but she said that someone else would have to accompany her to provide support. Hak and Yona immediately volunteered, but only young women were being accepted on the ship. Hak, Kija, and Yi all tried once more to insist, leaving the captain confused, so she chose Yun instead, since he understood explosives and had keen intuition. Disguised, he would be perfect, and he himself believed that as a woman he could fool anyone. Still, they were determined and agreed to act the next day. That night, Yona spoke with the captain, who reminded her to be careful once aboard, because she was as dear to her as a daughter, and no one could afford to risk her. Yona could barely remember her own mother anymore, but while speaking with the captain she felt an immense maternal warmth. As she walked away, Yona ran into Hak. He held her, unable to accept the thought of watching the princess step into danger. He wanted to protect her no matter what. Yona, however, once believed her father's kingdom was a just place. But during her journey she had seen how many regions still suffered. Now she was not even sure if her father had been a good ruler or not. But she knew all of it was her responsibility. That was why she had to fight, and she begged them to let her go. Hak could only watch as the princess disappeared into the night, her gaze leaving such a strong impression on him that he found himself rooting for her even more. The next day, Yona and Yun dressed as women, and Kija, along with Shin's squirrel, also put on disguises to accompany them. Seeing that the princess was nervous, Hak went to calm her before the two of them entered the trafficker's shop. They were taken into a secret section but soon fell into a trap, while the rest of the group stayed behind waiting for news. When they were caught, Yona's eyes were covered, and she was taken to a hideout with Yun. The two ended up in a cell crowded with other girls, and during the fall Yona hurt her ankle. Sometime later, the Lord arrived for inspection. Approaching Yona, he noticed she was different from the others and decided to keep her for himself. Yun tried to step in her place, but the Lord only looked at him, kicked him, and even punished his own men when they tried to intervene. He stepped on Yona and threatened the other girls to make sure no one would dare to escape. In the middle of that cruelty, he suddenly felt his hand burn as if scorched by the intensity of Yona's glare. Looking more closely, he thought he had seen her somewhere before. Luckily, he didn't recognize who she was, since he had heard she died during Suwon's coup. Even so, he swore he would never forget those eyes before leaving. Yona, in turn, promised she would not let that go unpunished. Some of the girls considered escape, but one of them had been trapped for 2 weeks already. For her, the thought of running away didn't even exist anymore. She said it was practically impossible. That hopelessness only spread despair among the others. But Yona stood out in the midst of all that sorrow, reigniting their will to fight. That night, Yona and Yun were blindfolded and taken elsewhere, while Hak was overwhelmed with worry, though still in better shape than the White Dragon. Deep down he too was anguished for Yona and Yun. No one showed it openly, but Jiwa, trying to act calm, was soon pressed by the others until Shin spotted several ships starting to move. The captain then ordered everyone to prepare to sail. Outside, Yun asked Shin's squirrel for help to untie the ropes. Once freed, they waited for the guard, ambushed him together, and knocked him out. Yona vowed to rescue everyone, though inside she was more frightened than ever. After steadying herself, she explained her plan again to the girls. Even with her ankle throbbing, she refused to stop. The princess's courage inspired the oldest of the girls, who finally decided to help, and soon all the captives joined in the plan. Her name was Yuri. Meanwhile, Hak's group began to move. The White Dragon leapt into battle at Yona's call, while the Blue Dragon still hadn't noticed her signal, and enemy numbers only grew. By direct order from the captain, no one was allowed to kill, so the Green Dragon dashed from ship to ship, aiding the crew. Inside, Yun drew 2 guards' attention so Yona and Yuri could drop crates over them, but then a wave rocked the ship. One guard escaped, and he grabbed Yuri as a hostage. Yona hesitated, torn between using the fireworks to save her or to send the signal, knowing she had only a few left. If it were the old Yun, he would have thought only of fleeing, but after traveling alongside such stubborn resolve, he had changed. Yun tore off his disguise and revealed himself as a pirate. The remaining guard went at Yun, who even let him land some blows. Then Yun declared that he had planted explosives all over the ship, and only he knew their locations. Leaving the guards cornered, the two dragged him off to search for the bags, warning that if they found nothing, they would use him as an example and kill him in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Yona grabbed a bag along with her bow and ran. The guard chased after her, but Yuri struck him in the head. Yun ended up being exposed and was about to be killed, but that was when Yona appeared. The enemies mocked her, thinking she was just a weak girl who would never do anything. Yet, when they faced her eyes, shining like the sky, they froze in fear. Seizing the chance, Yona rushed in, grabbed the fireworks from Yun, and fired them into the sky. The Blue Dragon saw the signal, and although Hak now knew their location, he was too far away to intervene. The only one who could reach them in time was the Green Dragon. Just as the enemies closed in on Yona, the Green Dragon burst in, sweeping everyone aside with just a few strikes. Yona and Yun celebrated that their plan had worked, but reinforcements from the Lord soon arrived. The Blue Dragon stepped in to support the Green Dragon, while Hak and the White Dragon kept holding the line at the dock. Once the situation came under control, the The only thing left was to capture the Lord. Hack and the White Dragon continued sinking enemy ships one by one, while other crew members rushed to assist the Green Dragon. When the Lord received word of the defeat, he chose to fight personally to protect the kingdom he had spent decades building. Yona had already located him on the ship alongside the Green and Blue Dragons. The area was swarming with soldiers, so the Blue Dragon went ahead, narrowly avoiding a trap and escaping. Upon entering, he realized the Lord had already fled, determined to return home, rebuild, and retaliate against Yona's group. While he was celebrating, the Blue Dragon tracked him down, and the Green Dragon closed in on the target. The Lord fired an arrow, striking the Green Dragon's shoulder and wounding him. As he prepared to fire again and finish the job, that merciless gaze returned to haunt him. In that instant, he realized the truth. It was the same red-haired girl from the capital. She was right there before him. Princess Yona did not hesitate. She shot an arrow straight into the Lord's chest, putting an end to his corrupt rule. And with that, the battle was over. Everyone returned to the harbor, where the rescued captives were reunited with their families. When Yona and Yun finally arrived, covered in injuries, Hack and the White Dragon were furious and vented their rage on the remaining traffickers. The captain celebrated their victory, announcing that there would be a feast for everyone, and the whole crew rejoiced together in high spirits. Later, Yona wandered through the city and unexpectedly crossed paths with Su-won. He was overjoyed to see that she was alive, confessing that he had been shocked to hear of her death, but relieved to find her again. Even so, Yona was shaken, remembering the sight of Su-won killing her father. Suddenly, Su-won embraced her, as his men were nearby, and he needed to conceal her presence. Inside, Yona felt the urge to strike him with the dagger at her side, but Su-won stopped her. After dismissing his guards, he told her that he understood her hatred and asked her to wait, as he still had unfinished matters to resolve. Su-won promised that when everything was over, she would be free to do whatever she wished. Then he left. Hack had been searching for Yona and came upon her in tears. One look at the scene was enough for him to understand what had happened. When Yona returned, she tried to put on a cheerful face, but her sadness was impossible to hide. During the meal, she accidentally spilled food on herself and began changing clothes in front of everyone. Hack quickly stepped in, urging her to do that in the captain's cabin instead. After Yona left, he joked with the others, asking if anyone had seen the princess, the Green Dragon. However, watched Hack closely, noticing that he never carried his spear into town without a reason. Something was definitely strange. While changing, Yona still held onto the hairpin Su-won had once given her. So much had happened since she left the castle. Later that night, she and Hack sat together, watching the sea. Yona said she wanted to leave that city and asked if he would go with her. Of course, Hack agreed to follow his princess. As always, the rest of the group eavesdropped on their conversation in secret, and Yona announced that they would depart the next morning. That night, another banquet was held, and the Green Dragon remained alone, playing music on a cliffside. Yona approached him, praised the melody, and tried playing herself, but only produced a strange, awkward sound. The two sat there talking for a while, until at last, Yi-ha decided to bid farewell to his old comrades in arms, those who had stood beside him in countless battles. That night would mark a new chapter in his life. Before leaving, Yi-ha sought out the captain for one last conversation. They reminisced about the past and reflected on his choice to follow Yona. They both knew the path ahead would not be easy, yet perhaps that was the true destiny of the dragons. Yi-ha's greatest struggle was his inability to relax, knowing that Yona would be far from his side, even though she was vulnerable, powerless, and always facing hardship with tears in her eyes. The truth was that he had been completely captivated by her unshakable determination. The very next day, everyone prepared for the journey, and the captain along with the rest of the crew gave Yona some advice and also handed her a magical herb. The hug Yona gave the captain felt like a warm farewell, almost like that of a mother and daughter. And so, the group continued their journey, and along the way Tim quickly noticed that Yera had sneaked in quietly. He forced him out of hiding, and in this way the group grew even larger. Yera's hunts made the meals much better, but they still had to find the last dragon, the Yellow Dragon. Yera volunteered to go after him, but the other dragons wanted to join as well, and soon a small argument began. While the three of them argued, Hack and Yun went to take care of the deer Yera had brought down, and Yona was left in charge of preparing the meat. Back when she lived in the palace, She never imagined she would one day take an animal's life, but ignoring it would be the same as pretending that life had no meaning. As she prayed for the deer, a man suddenly appeared beside her, agreeing with her view and saying that all beings were destined to reach paradise one day. Curiously, while he spoke, his stomach growled so loudly, and he drooled from hunger. He excused himself by saying he was only passing by and that she shouldn't worry. But Yona, sensing the situation, invited him to join them. Hak, Yona, and Yun started roasting the meat without paying much attention to who the new guest was after all. The other dragons were still busy arguing. While they ate, they spoke about the yellow dragon who, according to old tales, possessed an extremely resilient body. That's when, as the others returned, they were shocked to discover that the hungry wanderer was none other than the legendary yellow dragon himself. His name was Zeno, a drifter who enjoyed traveling and savoring life. Everyone felt he truly was special, though the only odd thing was that, unlike the others, Zeno did not show any particular reaction upon meeting Yona. Nobody really knew whether he was truly powerful or just scatterbrained. Before Yona could even invite him to join her group, he had already accepted, saying that since he loved novelty and good food, he would come along. Another reason, of course, was Yun's incredible cooking, still a bit suspicious. Kija asked Zeno for a demonstration of his famed resilience. To everyone's surprise, Hak knocked him out with a single blow, and Yun even joked that the yellow dragon's skin felt smoother than Yona's. To mock him, Hak declared himself the true yellow dragon, to which Kija responded that if Hak had to be a dragon, he should be the dark villain black dragon of the shadows, which, at least, would be stylish. In the end, Kija was overjoyed to finally see the group complete with all 4 dragons, and Yun was happy too, though the moment felt almost too simple for the weight it carried. That very night, Zeno sought out Yona and helped her gather firewood. She told him that, even if the others doubted, she trusted he was the true yellow dragon, for to her eyes his energy was entirely different, like a golden ray of light, even though they had just met. Being near Zeno gave her a sense of comfort. She introduced herself again formally, saying it would be an honor to walk alongside the yellow dragon, Zeno. Later, Yun reflected on the prophecy. When night falls, the blood of the dragons would be reborn, and according to the ancient pact, once all 4 dragons gathered, the sword and shield that would protect the king would awaken, and at dawn the Crimson Dragon would return. Yun already knew this would be the group's next goal. After a few days, they returned to Iksu's home, only to find everything turned upside down and the priest on the ground with a head injury. Upon investigating, they discovered it had all been caused by Iksu himself, out of pure hunger. Yun scolded him, but just by looking at Yona, Iksu immediately realized she had gone through many trials. Yun asked about the future of the prophecy, and the man explained that they still needed to wait until the sword and shield appeared, but that when the time came, Yona would know what to do. At that moment, Zeno spoke up for the first time, saying that the very purpose of gathering the 4 dragons was this. Deep down, ever since Hak and Yona had fled the palace, they had relied on the dragon's power to survive. But what would come after that? Would they spend their lives running, or would they try to reclaim the throne and face Su-1? With the strength of the 4, seizing the palace would be simple. Yet Zeno declared that he had no intention of fighting, since he was no good at it. Instead, he suggested Yona reflect on their true purpose before the moment of the prophecy arrived, because for now, everyone had decided to remain there. By the end of that afternoon, the 3 dragons and Hak sat together to discuss even the possibility of avenging Yona's father and challenging Su-1. But if they truly reclaimed the throne, what would come after that? It was difficult to imagine grand plans for someone only 16 years old, and the mere mention of Su-1's name made Hak rise to his feet and walk away. Later that same hour, Iksu and Yona spoke by the waterfall. Everything she had lived through reminded her of her father, who always sought peace above all else. But the people had never been truly happy. The more she saw of the world, the more she understood her own weaknesses. Yet, even so, someone always appeared to support her in difficult moments. She was still not strong enough to stand on her own, but there was always a hand reaching out, and countless people in the kingdom still needed her protection. She did not regret having faced that corrupt official, and she kept wondering how many more like him were scattered across the land. That was why she decided from then on she wanted to make a difference and help the people of the Kuka kingdom. She even apologized to her father for disobeying him and choosing to bear arms. Before returning to the palace, there were still important missions to complete. She also told Iksu that she had seen Su-1, confessing that though she felt hatred, she could not bring herself to strike him. Iksu explained that certain feelings never truly vanish, for they are meant to be confusing. In the middle of the night, while everyone else slept, Yona continued training under the rain, and Hak went after her, worried about her health. Together, they took shelter inside a cave. Yona realized Hak seemed uneasy with her training with a sword, and he admitted he wasn't angry, just concerned. But Yona wanted to rely less on him. She wanted to grow stronger. At one point, she had even asked Jeha to teach her how to fight, since Hak refused, but Jeha believed Hak didn't want to see her put in danger. In truth, Jeha thought Hak did not want her wielding a sword precisely because he wished for her happiness, for her to be protected. He even teased that Hak wanted to hide her so that no other man would look at her. And just as he was about to call Hak possessive, Yun cut in and Yona dismissed it as merely one of Jeha's jokes. Hak then explained the opposite. He wanted everyone at the palace to see how strong she was. And one day he would throw it in their faces that this was the girl they had cast out, Princess Yona, who cut her hair, took up the sword, and became a symbol of courage in defense of her own land. Just hearing this made Yona incredibly happy, and she soon fell asleep by Hak's side, while he gave her a tender kiss on the forehead. And here we wrap up our video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like and drop a comment below. Maybe tell us your favorite dragon color red, perhaps, just so we know you watched until the very end. That's it, everyone. Take care, God bless, and see you in the next video. Bye.